They always thought of us as cowards. The humans, they said, are afraid of war? It wasn't a whispered insult, but one openly discussed among the great species of the Galactic Council. We had come so far, earned our place among the stars, but no matter how many breakthroughs we made in science, medicine, or diplomacy, we could never shake the image that we were somehow weak. The other species had fought countless wars to carve out their place in the galaxy. We had avoided them, choosing peace and negotiation. To the Council, that wasn't a sign of strength, it was a mark of fear. It wasn't that we couldn't fight. Earth had known more wars than any of these species would ever experience in 1,000 lifetimes. But we had learned. The price of war was always too high, the cost too great, the victories too hollow. So, we chose a different path. But the Council couldn't understand that. They saw only that humanity didn't build warships as big or weapons as powerful as theirs. We didn't posture or threaten. In their eyes, that meant we were afraid. And fear, to them, was weakness. The Council session was just another example of this arrogance. A new threat had emerged at the far edge of the galaxy, a species no one had encountered before. They were aggressive, expanding rapidly, conquering systems in their path. The Council gathered in haste, their warlords and admirals bristling with anticipation, ready to flex their military might. Our ambassador, calm and composed, urged caution. "We don't know enough yet," they said. "We should seek understanding first, perhaps diplomacy." The room erupted in laughter, a wave of condescending amusement that rippled across the Council chamber. To them, our suggestion of peace was an act of cowardice. But it wasn't cowardice. It was knowledge, hard-earned knowledge of what war truly meant. The Council didn't care. They were ancient species, proud and hardened by centuries of conflict. Their entire societies were built on warfare. Military might was the only true measure of power in their eyes. Every one of them had faced extinction at one point, had fought and bled to survive. We were newcomers in their view, guests in a galactic order forged by blood and fire. To them, we were simply naive, idealists who didn't understand how the galaxy truly worked. Our contributions in fields like medicine and diplomacy were acknowledged but never truly respected. We had advanced the galactic community in ways that didn't involve guns and bombs, and that, to the Council, was secondary. The fact that we hadn't fought any major intergalactic wars was, in their eyes, proof of our inferiority. Our seat on the Council was tolerated, but it was clear that we were not seen as equals. And when it came to discussions of war, humanity was often ignored. Our ambassador would offer suggestions, strategic insights from our long history of conflict on Earth, only to be dismissed as irrelevant. In the Council's eyes, we were afraid of war. What they failed to see, what they refused to understand, was that humanity wasn't afraid of war. We simply knew its true nature far too well. We had perfected war on our home planet, but in the process, we had learned a lesson that these ancient races had never grasped. War was not something to be glorified. It was something to be avoided at all costs. The Council didn't see it that way. They were warriors, after all. They reveled in the idea of crushing their enemies, of proving their superiority on the battlefield. And so, when this new threat emerged, they turned their backs on us once again, laughing off our warnings. A new enemy had been detected on the fringes of known space. No one knew who or what they were, only that their expansion was relentless. Systems that once belonged to other species fell silent, their transmissions cut off. The Council scrambled to respond, but the general consensus was clear: this was just another enemy to crush. They had faced threats before, and they had always won. The idea that they could fail didn't even cross their minds. The human ambassador, ever patient, tried once more to offer a more measured approach. "We need more information," they said. "We should avoid direct confrontation until we understand the enemy's capabilities." But again, the Council laughed. "Typical humans," one of the counselors sneered. "Always afraid to fight." Another chimed in. "You have no stomach for war. Let those of us with real strength handle this." The Council's decision was made. They would send a fleet to engage the enemy directly. They had no need for human help, no need for our advice or expertise. We were pushed aside, as always, our contributions to be in logistics and support, menial tasks unworthy of a true warrior species. The human ambassador did not protest. They nodded once and took their place back in the shadows of the chamber. The council had made up its mind, and there was no point in arguing. The ambassadors from other races strutted out, eager to prove their worth on the battlefield. But the tension in the air was palpable. The human ambassador, their face impassive, simply waited. We had seen this before. The council was overconfident, dismissive of any approach that wasn't steeped in aggression. They had faced threats before, but this one felt different. The enemy continued its advance, system after system falling in their path. The council's fleets mobilized, confident in their victory before the first shot had even been fired. But something was wrong. The enemy moved with precision, their tactics and technologies unlike anything the council had ever seen. And humanity, standing in the background, waited. We knew the price of war. We had paid it in blood long before we ever reached the stars. We weren't afraid of war. We just understood it better than they ever could. The council's fleets were ready. They had never faced an enemy they couldn't defeat. The council's forces, hardened by centuries of warfare, surged forward to meet the threat head-on, confident in their strength. Their warships, gleaming with advanced alien technology, launched into the first wave of combat without hesitation. This was their domain, their expertise, their history of triumph written in the stars. And now, this new threat would crumble before them just like all the others. But the enemy didn't crumble. The council's ships, accustomed to overwhelming their foes with brute force and superior numbers, found themselves outmaneuvered. The enemy's vessels moved with an eerie precision, their strategies far more advanced than anyone had anticipated. Their weapons pierced through the council's shields like they were paper. The council had never seen anything like it. This wasn't an enemy they could crush with sheer power. It was something altogether different. In a matter of hours, key fleets had been torn apart. Entire squadrons disintegrated in the void of space, their remains scattered like debris across the galaxy. The council had expected a show of dominance. Instead, they were facing utter devastation. The battle-hardened species who had mocked humanity for their so-called fear were now experiencing a fear of their own, a fear they had long forgotten. Panic spread through the council. What had been a confident march to victory was now a desperate scramble for survival. Desperation set in. Communications across the council channels became frantic, with admirals and generals shouting for reinforcements, demanding explanations, trying to salvage what was left of their fleets. Every strategy they tried, every battle formation they employed, failed. This enemy was unlike anything they had faced before. They had been too arrogant, too overconfident in their abilities, and now they were paying the price. Still, no one wanted to admit it, but the council members knew deep down that they were losing. The realization crept in slowly, painfully. They had underestimated their foe, just as they had underestimated humanity. The irony hung in the air, unspoken but palpable. Eventually, the council had no choice. They turned to humanity, the species they had mocked and sidelined for so long. Even in this moment of desperation, they did so with reluctance, unable to fully shed their arrogance. They didn't ask for military help. They still couldn't bring themselves to believe that humanity could offer anything in that realm. Instead, they called for logistical support, hoping the humans could, at the very least, repair and refuel what was left of the council's crippled fleets. The human ambassador stood calmly before them, the same ambassador they had laughed at not so long ago. The council's demands were laced with skepticism, their voices filled with condescension, but the ambassador was unfazed. There was no fear in their eyes, no panic, no uncertainty. Instead, there was something else, something the council members had never seen in humanity before: quiet confidence. The ambassador spoke with a tone of calm authority, hinting at something the council had never considered. "We understand warfare," the ambassador said. "Perhaps better than you realize." The council members exchanged confused glances. What could these humans possibly understand about war that they, the great species of the galaxy, did not? Humanity had always been reluctant to engage in battle, always advocating for peace. Surely, this was because they feared conflict. But the truth, as the ambassador explained, was far more complex. Humanity had not avoided war out of fear, they had avoided it because they knew its true cost. Earth had been a battleground for millennia, humans had waged war upon one another countless times, and the lessons learned from those bloody conflicts ran deep in their civilization. Unlike the Council, whose societies had been forged in war and had never moved past it, humanity had grown to understand that war was a last resort, not a badge of honor. The ambassador's words were calm but carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. We have seen destruction on a scale that you cannot imagine. We have lived through it, survived it, and risen above it. That is why we value peace, not because we are afraid of war, but because we know what it truly means. Still, the Council wasn't convinced. But they didn't have time to argue. The enemy was advancing rapidly, and their fleets were in ruins. Desperation was setting in, and even the most warlike of the Council species could feel the creeping sense of hopelessness. Then came the moment that would change everything. Without fanfare, without warning, humanity revealed what they had kept hidden for so long, their fleet. It wasn't massive, not like the towering armadas of the Council's other member species. But it was something entirely different. Sleek, adaptive, efficient. Human ships emerged from hidden bases across the galaxy, moving in coordinated precision. The Council members, stunned into silence, could hardly believe their eyes. This was not the fleet of a species afraid of war. This was a fleet that had prepared for war in ways the Council had never even considered. The Council had assumed that humanity's reluctance to fight was a sign of weakness. But they were wrong. Humanity had always been preparing for this moment, not with the brute force the Council so valued, but with strategy, with innovation, with a deep understanding of how to adapt and evolve. Their ships weren't the largest, but they were equipped with technology the Council had never seen: adaptive shielding, modular weapon systems, and advanced AI coordination. It was clear that humanity had been watching, learning, and quietly building in the background while the Council had underestimated them. As humanity's fleet moved to engage the enemy, the tide of the battle shifted. The Council members, still in disbelief, watched as the smaller human ships outmaneuvered the enemy, exploiting weaknesses that the Council's forces had been blind to. It wasn't just about firepower, it was about strategy, adaptability, and a level of tactical brilliance that the Council had never expected from the species they had long dismissed. The humans weren't just surviving this battle, they were turning the tide. The enemy, so devastating to the Council's forces, now found itself on the defensive, reeling under the coordinated strikes of humanity's fleet. For the first time, the Council saw humanity for what they truly were: not cowards, not weaklings, but warriors. Warriors who had mastered the art of war in ways that the Council had never imagined. The Council could only watch in stunned silence as humanity did what they could not: turn defeat into victory. Humanity's ships sliced through the darkness of space like a well-orchestrated symphony. Every movement was precise, purposeful. The enemy, once an overwhelming force, now struggled to keep up with the relentless onslaught. Where the Council's larger, more powerful warships had faltered, humanity's smaller, more adaptive fleet thrived. Their ships weren't built for sheer power, they were designed with ingenuity, efficiency, and a deep understanding of what war truly demanded. The enemy, with their brute force and rigid formations, was no match for humanity's advanced tactics. Each human commander played their part with calculated precision, drawing the enemy into traps, exploiting weaknesses, and using every piece of technology to its fullest potential. Humanity's ships danced around the enemy's massive war machines, dodging fire and responding with strikes that crippled their opponents' most vulnerable systems. It wasn't just technology that gave humanity the edge. It was their understanding of war, how it wasn't just about who had the bigger gun, but who could think 10 steps ahead. The Council had relied on strength alone for too long. But war wasn't about brute force. It was about adaptation, resilience, and strategy. And humanity, having evolved through centuries of internal conflict, knew this better than anyone. Their reluctance to engage in war had always been mistaken for fear, when in reality, it was born from wisdom. They fought only when necessary, but when they did, they fought to win. As the enemy's lines broke, it became clear who was in control. The alien invaders, once a terrifying force poised to conquer the galaxy, were now in full retreat. Their once mighty warships, reduced to smoldering wreckage, floated aimlessly through space. Humanity's commanders didn't celebrate their victory with arrogance or fanfare. There was no need. They had come to do what was necessary, to protect not just their species, but the entire galaxy. On the Council's command center, the silence was deafening. Where there had once been confident sneers and mocking laughter, there was now only stunned disbelief. The species that had once been ridiculed for their pacifism were now the undisputed heroes of the day. The Council had mocked humanity for their hesitation, their preference for diplomacy over conflict. But now, faced with the evidence of their defeat, they could no longer deny the truth. Humanity had never been afraid of war. They had simply understood it far better than the Council ever could. The Council members watched as their once unstoppable enemy crumbled under the weight of humanity's tactical brilliance. Every strike, every maneuver had been executed with flawless precision. Humanity's fleet, though smaller, had outsmarted an enemy that had torn through the Council's forces like they were nothing. The realization was painful. The Council's reliance on brute strength had failed them, while humanity's strategic approach had turned the tide of the war. The human ambassador, who had once stood before the Council in silence as they dismissed and belittled humanity's contributions, now watched the tide of battle turn in their favor. There was no smugness in their expression, no hint of gloating. They didn't need to say, "I told you so." The proof of humanity's strength was right in front of them, unfolding in real time. The species that had been cast aside as weak and afraid had saved the galaxy from annihilation. The final moments of the battle came swiftly. The enemy, now fully routed, began retreating back to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. What had begun as an invasion that threatened the entire Council was now a desperate escape. Humanity had not just turned the tide of the war, they had ended it. With a precision and decisiveness that no one on the Council could have anticipated, the galaxy was saved. In the aftermath, the Council could no longer hide from the truth. Their own arrogance had nearly led to their downfall. The human ambassador, once laughed at and ridiculed, now stood as a beacon of the very strength they had refused to acknowledge. The Council chamber was silent as the ambassador spoke, not with anger or triumph, but with the calm, measured tone of a species that had learned long ago the true cost of war. "We are not afraid of war," the ambassador said. "We simply know what it costs. We have fought too many battles to seek war without reason. But when the time comes, when we must protect what matters, we fight with everything we have. Not with arrogance, not with bravado, but with the knowledge of what's at stake." The Council members, for once, had no retort. Their pride had been shattered, their assumptions laid bare for all to see. The humans had saved them, not just through their military might, but through their wisdom, their understanding of what war truly meant. The Council, once so sure of their own superiority, now found themselves humbled in the face of a species they had long underestimated. In the days that followed, the Council convened once more. But this time, the tone was different. The human ambassador was not sidelined or dismissed. They were listened to with the respect they had always deserved. The other Council members, still reeling from the battle, had come to a simple but profound realization. Humanity's strength was not in their weapons or ships, but in their ability to adapt, to learn, and to understand the true nature of conflict. The Council offered humanity not just a seat at the table, but a place of respect and recognition. No longer would they be treated as a species afraid of war. No longer would they be mocked for their diplomacy or dismissed for their preference for peace. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of, and it would never forget. As the Council members returned to their territories, the galaxy itself had changed. Humanity's place in the universe was secure. They were no longer seen as the timid species who avoided war at all costs. They were the species that had saved the galaxy, the species that had mastered the art of war, not through brute strength, but through wisdom, strategy, and resilience. And as the narrator reflected on these events, they left the galaxy with a simple truth: humanity had never been afraid of war. They simply understood it better than anyone else. And that understanding had made them the most formidable force the galaxy had ever known.